Oh, Sheila, how did you find living through the war?
Well, actually, I was born in 1933 in Stretford. 1932, sorry, in Stretford. And by 1933, my parents had moved to Broad Oak Road in Benshill. My father was a master chef, and mother was just an ordinary housewife at that time. And when the war broke out, I can't really remember much about it, but I know that the actual day or anything like that, but I know that I never ever felt afraid of things. But by about 1942, my father had been called up into the army, because prior to that he'd been working for the American forces at Burton Wood, so we had kind of I suppose a delayed thing.
Reserved occupation.
Pardon?
A reserved occupation.
Yes. I mean, he wasn't in their forces, but he worked for them, because we can remember going, he used to take us on occasions to the camp perhaps of a weekend if he was, and that kind of thing. So by 1943, I'd gone to St John's, Benshill, to school, and the only thing I can remember about that is the blackout in the school hall. All these big black sheets that
was Mr. Hanlon the headmaster?
Mr. Hanlon was the headmaster, yes. And I went all through that school, and I was still in touch with Mr. Hanlon and up until when he died, really, and his wife. He was a great headmaster.
He was my headmaster.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Did you go to St John's?
I did.
Oh. So when I was about 11, in 1942 my father was called up, and by 1941, 42, I just got my scholarship at St John's to go to pass on to the next school, which was the Notre Dame in Bignor Street at Cheetham Hill. And I had no qualms really about travelling that way from here, to Bignor Street. When I think of it now, I've said many a times, going all the way from Wythenshawe, I had to get 2 buses, one to the Palace, and then one from the Palace, either 62 or 75, or one of those buses that went up Cheetham Hill Road. But just before I started there in the summer, after passing the scholarship, I had to have an eye operation. And at that time, my father had been drafted to way up in the north of Scotland. Now, a lot of this that I know I've only found out through doing my family history, because my father never spoke. Well, I don't know whether he was sworn to secrecy or what, but he got very friendly with the parish priest up in there. You went to a place called Malaig, and then had to get a boat across. And I've only found again that where it was a secret training service. He was attached then to the SOE, where a lot of these people that were dropped into Europe, I can't remember the names, what do they call them?
Parachutists. No, sorry.
They were dropped by parachute, but anyway, a lot of these French resistance.
Sorry to interrupt, what anybody know what SOE stands for?
Yes. Secret Operations Executive.
Secret
Operation.
Special
now,
operation.
Yeah, I've only found that out through doing the family history and getting his records. I knew he was there because I had this operation, and the parish priest, who was called Colin Macpherson, later became Archbishop of Argyll and the Isles. My father had struck quite a good friendship with him and used to do decorating and things like that. It was only a little part. There were only about 40 or 50 people on this. It was an island. Well, it looked like an island, but it was attached to the mainland up in the north of Scotland. But the only way you could get to it was about a 20 or 30 mile hike through very, very rough terrain. So the only way was by boat. So he said, Father Collins said to my father, he had to come home on compassionate leave when I had this operation. And Father Collins said to him, if you can bring Sheila back up here when you come back, he said she can stay in the presbytery with my housekeeper, Bella MacDonald, and she will look after her. It'll be good recuperation for her because there was no traffic, no cars, no anything like that, and it'll do her good. So I can remember going to Victoria Station and getting on the train and going up right the way up there. It took from about 6 o'clock one night. We got to Malay about in the morning, because we were on the, and I can remember, my father pointing out different things on the way of when it was light. And then this boat to go across to the mainland. Now this boat only went 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and it took the provisions for the people living there and the mail. And I don't know, you might have heard of Lord Brockett, who's in the past at some stage or other, but he owned 2 shooting lodges on this island that had been taken over by the Ministry of Defence, I suppose, for the for training and whatnot. And that is where the people did the training. And my father was trained, but he wasn't in actual, because he was providing them with the food and everything to keep going. And it was absolutely peaceful. It was gorgeous. The presbytery and the church was up on the side of a hill, and the deer used to come to the back door of the presbytery, and kind of not because that's the way they were been used to think, how they carried on their. And he was from Benbecula, the priest. So I had 8 weeks up there till I went back to school in this idyllic surroundings.
Did your father ever speak of what role he was?
Never, no. I think they think there must have been sworn to secrecy because it was such, it was a secret operation kind of thing. He talked about the people. When I say the people, I never knew, but I found out since there were several notable names that trained at the same place. So then, of course, I came back. We became quite friendly with the priest, and after the war was over, we used to. We've spent many holidays up there in the Highlands of Scotland, staying in the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse. There was just one teacher, and Miss McLean, and she used to go off during the summer months for a holiday. And all the children, there were only about 20, it might not have even been that many, but she taught the whole of the people in the area. And so that was one of my happy moments, really, and I never ever felt afraid. But coming back to Manchester, sort of leading up to that, we had an Anderson shelter in our back garden, and that was where my father had got it all rigged up with bunks and whatnot, and when the bad air raids started to come, that was where we used to go. We'd got blankets and all sorts of things, like some of the other people have already said. And we used to watch in our bedroom window, the back bedroom window, at the bombs dropping down on Manchester in the Manchester Blitz, where, we didn't get hit in that area, but we could see it happening, and another thing that a lot of people don't know, that I've spoken to quite a few people quite recently, and I know from personal experience that before Ringway, when it was known as Ringway Airport, before ever it progressed to anything like it is now, it's nothing like it was in the early days, sort of a little booth there, but it was a training ground, a training camp for the troops that were dropped into Arnhem. Paratroopers, yes. And I know, again, because a cousin of mine, this is all personal experience that people think that sometimes you've made up as a fairy tale. But he actually trained there. And then when the Arnhem had finished and they started to take prisoners of war, it was turned into a prisoner of war camp for the German prisoners of war. And a couple of years ago, through my what's-names on items that I'd written on the internet, a lady got in touch with me and said she was trying to write an article about these things, and she tried all manner of things to get information about the German prisoners of war at Ringway, and she couldn't. There was nothing on the internet at all. So she said to me in communications with the emails, would I give her, she'd like to write an article about it, and would I give her any information that I had. So I agreed to, and actually in the end it was published, and I think Joan at some stage has got a copy of that.
Wow, that's amazing.
So, and as a result of that, those prisoners being at the airport, there came a time when they were able to go out, they were relaxing the rules a bit on them. And another thing that people don't generally know is that St John's, Thomas Benchill, Father Murphy, who was a parish priest there, approached the mothers and the people of the parish. It was coming up to Christmas time, and said he'd been in touch with the people in charge at the prisoner camp, and they were willing to let any prisoners that wanted to come to a party at St John's, because it was Christmas. They were away from their families and homes, and that they were probably only just ordinary people like we were, like we were. So he agreed, and he was responsible probably for about 30 or so prisoners coming in one of these big trucks, and the parishioners pooled the rations and all sorts of things and gave them a nice party. And as a result of that, it was such a success, and there was no misfortune in it. Everybody behaved. He then asked the parishioners if there was any of them that would be willing to take them into their homes, perhaps on a Sunday afternoon, just for a couple of hours, for a cup of tea and a sandwich, to give them, a family-friendly hand. Well, of course, by this time my father had been through the war and seen what had happened in Germany, and been through it, and he never spoke. I found a lot of what happened to him from his records, his army records. He said, we'll do that. And we had about 4 or 5 used to come to us every Sunday afternoon for a cup of tea and a sandwich and a cake, and a song around the piano. I used to play the piano, and they used to, have a sing, and they were really, really happy, and a couple of other families did it. There's a family that now live in St Hilda's, the Hoys. I don't know if anybody knows Bernard Hoy and Kathleen Hoy. Kathleen, God rest her soul, she's dead. But she kept in touch with ones that went to her place, and I kept in touch with a few. I mean, I've got all the photographs and things, the little bits and things that there's. Another thing about them being at, one of them was an artist. He was called Kurt Bonnet, Bonnett, and I think he was from Hamburg. And he was that grateful. He didn't speak very much English, and he was a very quiet man, but he was that grateful to be able to come into the house and meet with the family on a Sunday afternoon, that he'd painted my mother this picture from memory of his, somewhere near to where he lived. And that picture hangs on my wall still today. And I've got his photograph and that, but he couldn't speak much English, and that was, so I've often thought I might try to see if I could, but you get into a brick wall, because you get all these sites, and they tell you that there are no records of these people. And they did. I mean, I know there's I know they were there. I'm not dreaming it, because I've got photographs to prove it.
Tell you what's interesting, Sheila. I can tell you what's interesting, Sheila. The fact that is almost a hidden history. As
Yes,
you
it
say, you
is,
can't find it on
because
the
they can't, it's no, you go to Manchester Library, the Central Library, you go to Wythenshawe Library, there is nothing at all recorded, and that's why I wanted to get it recorded, so that somewhere in the way, you know, it's the hidden history of the area for another
Exactly.
start. Now, one of them, the one that spoke the best English, was a chap called Peter Kirschbaum, and he was from Munich. And he'd not been back in, and he's been to visit the family a few times since the war ended. He was in the police force, and he used to come to police conferences at Blackpool, you know, multinational things and all this, and he used to come and visit us. Now, he was getting married, and he invited me to his wedding, but at that time, you know, I'd only just started work, and, you know, things were on just what's name. So I couldn't afford to go, sadly. He sent me photographs of his wedding, and we still corresponded, and a couple of years later I did manage to go to Munich on holiday to visit him, and he photographed my visit from stepping off the plane at Munich airport to getting back onto it at Munich airport, and sent me all the photographs. And I've got them all, you know, I've got all these photographs
that would be so
museums.
amazing. Actually.
And I've also got a beautiful, what I call it, cushion cover that you sent, of, you know, like the Tyrolean girl and boy embroidered. And I've got that cushion there still today, and another sketch of the Court, the artist, drew, and I don't know whose birthday it was, but it was either for my birthday or my mother's birthday, and he'd drawn a lovely picture and you know, put, and the reason I'm saying Otto is because he was friendly with this other one that came, Otto. He used to come to our house from Göttingen, he was. So, you know, I've got lots. Sorry for going on for so long.
So you've lived in that. You've lived in Wythenshawe.
What you say, Claire? Go again,
You've lived in Wythenshawe most of your life, haven't you? So, you know, so you could
So
we'll
put those images in your film.
After the war ended, my father joined the CCG, the Control Commission for Germany, and it was to help reorganise, you know, the country again. And we were, the family went over, but I was so terribly homesick. I was at boarding school. We had one of the best, you know, there, a place called King Alfred School Plane. You can go on the internet and find all about it. And my sister and I were on the first intake of that school opening. But my mother wouldn't stay. My mother said she's not, you know, she didn't want to stay, so.